would like to introduce Jeff Larson, the former CMO of Stew Leonard. I hope most of you know about Stew Leonard. It is a family-owned and operated farm business which was founded in 1969. So they are very famous. They are known as the Disneyland of dairy stores because of the costume characters, the scheduled entertainment, the petting zoos, and the entire experience of the stores, which is there throughout all the stores. And Jeff, the main focus of him when he was the CMO of Stew Leonard's was to digitally transform the business so that you can improve the customer experience. Prior to Stew Leonard's, he was working as the brand marketer for Subway restaurants globally. There also he was involved in several key initiatives such as the $5 footlongs, the launch of breakfast, the Fresh Fit, and also about the collaboration they developed with Disney. So it is a great honor for the school that is a Yale SOM alumnus from the class of 1999. And currently he resides in Connecticut with his wife and children. So today, let us learn from him his approach for digital transformation and how the marketers can approach a tech-savvy generation without alienating their existing customers from a 30,000 feet view, because he was a CMO, so he knows how strategically you can do that. So please join hands in welcoming him.
Hello, everybody. Everybody get some food? Never want a hungry audience, right? Well, maybe you do. I don't know. So as she said, I was thrilled to be invited to come back and speak to everybody. I'm a Yale SOM graduate, class of 1999. Had a great experience here. You're all very fortunate to be a part of this wonderful institution. At the time when I was here, I was focused on marketing and on strategy. Professor Ravi Dar was actually my first marketing professor here, and we'll see at the end whether he wants to take credit for that or not, but had a wonderful experience, not just from a marketing and strategy perspective, but also from a general management perspective. And I would say, one thing I would say to all of you, take advantage of learning about other disciplines while you're here, especially as you advance in your career, even if you think you want to be a marketer or a strategist or someone in finance. All of those skills are important and going to serve you well. I was just saying, I think as my career has grown, I find I do a lot more HR, for example, as I'm managing teams of people than I ever did early in my career. So really take advantage of everything that Yale has to offer. I certainly did, and it's very much helped me out throughout my career. So a big title, Lessons on the Road to Digital Transformation. What I wanted to talk to you about today was just some of the things as I reflect back on my career in marketing that I think are important as we, as team members, as leaders within organizations, work to transform companies and basically bring them into this digital age. How do we transition? How do we make sure we stay focused on the customer throughout that process and really be smart about what technology means and also what stayed the same? I think we can easily get distracted and lose sight of what's important as this is all happening. Just curious, show of hands, just so I have a little sense of who's here. I mean, how many of you would say you're kind of interested in marketing careers? Marketing careers? What about strategy, more of a strategic focus? What about technology? Who would say they're technologists at heart? Well, I would tell you that a marketing career is all three of those things. And I would say the first two I knew when I was here were important. So I studied, as I said, marketing and strategy. But I have found throughout my career in marketing that technology has played a bigger and bigger role in what I had to do to be successful in my career. So really, that's what I wanted to talk to you about today and just share some of my lessons learned and thoughts on that transition. A lot of conversation about digital disruption and what that means. It's certainly not the first time there's been a change within society affecting businesses. You can probably think in history about lots of different ones, not just within marketing, but throughout business. Steam moving to electricity. From a marketing perspective, you think about radio and television and print and the rise of the internet. So there's certainly been things that have preceded this that have been transformational from a marketing perspective. I would tell you in my career in marketing, where we are right now is definitely the biggest disruption that I've seen. And also, with any disruption comes a lot of opportunity. So as I think back about my career, clearly, the age that we're in now just has incredible wealth of opportunities that weren't even available to us 10 years ago as marketers. And I think what's different and what's intriguing about this time is if you think about some of the changes, so for example, I mentioned screens and radio and television, certainly the rise of mobile and the rise of the internet. What's interesting is kind of a lot of what's happening in marketing is on the other side of the screen. Right? So if you think about the different channels, the different avenues that you can reach customers, what's really exciting is everything that's happening behind the scenes with big data, with your ability to leverage that data to make meaningful insights about your customer, about your business, and how you apply that to actually deliver value. How do you grow sales? How do you build a business? How do you build a brand? And that's where it really gets exciting. I mean, the other piece that comes with big data is how do you actually harness that. So what's also really expanded is the number of tools available to marketers to help you sift through that, navigate that. I often talk about one of my biggest challenges being, if there's 30 things you can do, what are the 3 you should do, right? So how do you kind of transition from all of these possibilities, because they're infinite, into what are the few things that I really want to focus on that I think are going to make a meaningful difference to my business? So that's really where the power of this comes in. The other thing I would say to you is, as much as things change, there's a lot of fundamentals that stay the same. And I would say this is a key point that a lot of people get distracted around is, with all of this disruption, with all of these changes that are happening in different industries, in different marketplaces, with customers, with society, there's a lot of things that I learned week 1 of my marketing career that I would say are as important now as ever. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So anybody here familiar with Stew Leonard's? Okay, that's good to see. I mean, it's a regional grocery wine merchant within the Northeast, about 14 locations. But what's interesting about them is kind of outsized in terms of their reputation. They've been around since the 60s, and we're really one of the pioneers in kind of this very customer-oriented, customer-first mentality as it applied to retailing. The founder, Stew Leonard Sr., and Stew Jr., who runs the business today, really have championed this throughout the years. And it's been, I think, one that a lot of other industries have turned to as a good kind of reminder, just say it's about the customer. And if you haven't seen this big rock that sits out in front of each of the stores with the policy, the customer policy, Rule 1, the customer is always right. Rule 2, if the customer is ever wrong, we read Rule 1. It's simple, but it's clear. But it also sets a standard to live up to. And I would tell you, whatever industry you're in, this is an important kind of bedrock principle to be thinking about. It really has to be a customer-first approach to technology, right? Again, we can get very distracted about what's new, the bright, shiny object, and it can take you away from some of the fundamentals that are really important to what you do. So start with the customer in mind. It'll never do you wrong. And it also translates into customer experience. And I'm going to talk a lot about that today, because I think really where technology is most effectively being applied to help consumers and to help businesses is in the customer experience. How does it transform maybe an old way of how customers might have experienced or interacted with a brand in the past, and how is that changing? What are the new tools that are available to them? What are the new tools that are available to you to help with those interactions? I've been fortunate in my career. I've worked with some great brands. As I was thinking about this talk today, it's kind of reflecting on, okay, what have I learned? What can I take from the different experiences I've had? And I would tell you that each of these had an important role to play in my development as a marketer. I started my career in consulting, was at Procter & Gamble for about almost 8 years, left and went to Subway restaurants, a retail experience, so from consumer products to retail. I was there for about 9 years, and most recently at Stew Leonard's. Each of these, I think, for me, had some important lessons in my development, just in terms of business, personally, professionally, and I think are also very relevant to how we think about digital transformation and what's important as we apply technology to consumer and business challenges. Maybe another way to think about this is the idea of CPG tail, right? So I said I had some consumer products experience. I also have a lot of retail experience. When I was at business school, I remember the questions being asked, like, are you going to go into CPG? Are you going to go into retail? Like it was some distinct path that didn't really intersect very much. If anybody's interested in marketing, I would certainly recommend and advise you get experience in both of those universes. And I would tell you, more and more brands themselves are having to operate in both of these spaces. Just think about some of the disruptions that's happening in some industries with consumer products companies that are now direct selling. Right? So think of Dollar Shave Club, right? And how transformational that was to Gillette's business in terms of their model of selling through retailers, which they really had to scramble to catch up with. So more and more consumer products brands our direct selling to customers through different channels, the proliferation of number of channels that you can reach customers through is incredible. But that's really created a mindset which is important on both sides of the equation. And the other thing I would tell you about the difference between, I found in my career from CPG to retail, CPG, working my days at Procter & Gamble, I would tell you were just so critical to my foundational skills as a marketer. Very consumer-focused orientation, very strategic. From a retail perspective, I think retail teaches you urgency. It teaches you immediacy. It's kind of that roll up your sleeves, get into it. It's about selling, right? It's about, if I put something in the marketplace today, I'm going to find out on Friday if it's working or not. So there's an immediacy to retail, which I also think an urgency to retail, which is really important for any marketer, no matter what you're doing. So as I said, I started my career in marketing at Procter & Gamble. The other thing I didn't say about those companies I worked for, I would say I'm a brand marketer first and foremost. I'm just passionate about marketing and helping to build brands. And I've worked in hair color and hair care. I've worked at a sub shop. I've sold groceries. So obviously I've worked across a number of different categories. But the fundamentals, I would tell you, matter now more than ever. So it's, as I was saying, it's easy to get distracted. There's so many bright, shiny objects out there. We all want to run this way. We want to run that way. Especially as marketers, it's easy to get caught up in what's the new emerging technology and why am I not on, Snapchat or all these different proliferation of different ways to talk to customers. But you have to make sure you're grounded in a strong understanding of your brand, who you are, what you're trying to accomplish. And use that as really the starting point for any conversation you're going to have around technology. Think about marketing. I mean, one of the roles that marketers play within organizations is as the voice of the customer, right? They're meant to be the champion for the customer. So now more than ever, I would say it's critical that you have that mind's eye of saying, okay, let's make sure I understand my brand, our purpose, our vision, what are we trying to accomplish, who do we want to be when we grow up, first and foremost, and then apply technology to figure out how can that help. How can we improve our business? How can we improve our interaction with customers through technology? I've seen a lot of different marketing models in my career. You talk to different consulting firms. They've all got their own model that they want to sell you about how to build brands or build marketing. I would tell you the simplest and clearest articulation I learned early days at Procter boils down to something close to this, which is, yes, you need to understand your brand, what equities you have, what your purpose is, all of those things I was just talking about in the last slide. But fundamentally, a marketer is asking a couple of key questions. It's who am I going to talk to? When I have their attention, what am I going to tell them? And then how am I going to do that? That who, what, how, simplicity to the model, I would tell you, is pretty universal as you think about different marketing questions that you're going to ask. It's really important to spend time here and to dig into this, even as you think about technology and digital disruption and all the things that factor into how is this changing fundamentally how consumers interact with brands and what we do as businesses. But think about the who, right? Segmentation, more important than ever, right? We have all these ways to connect with customers, in a very targeted way, really understand who they are, their behaviors. Well, we really need to make sure we get that piece right? We really need to spend the time to make sure we understand who those segments are and why they're important. As I mentioned, the what, that's everything from our equities, how are we differentiated within the marketplace, what's our unique selling proposition? If I have your attention, what am I going to tell you? But technology itself is really playing in a lot in the how. If you think about all the different social media platforms and ways that customers can engage that they couldn't even 10 years ago, this is really where technology is, I think, transforming a lot of that activity. And how is ultimately, okay, I know who I want to reach, I know what I want to talk to them about. Where are they, right? Where am I going to find them? And it might change as I think about where they are within the customer journey. But these questions are so critical to getting strategy right within as you think about digital and technology. Just to build on that a little bit, has anybody had any experience with mapping customer journeys or familiarity with that? Have you guys talked about that in classes? It's so important. And this is really where the rubber meets the road with technology, because as you're thinking about a customer's process, whether it's a B2C or B2B business, you're basically trying to understand how do customers learn about your brand, about your business, what are they doing, how are they buying your business, and then ultimately how are they experiencing your business and how is that getting communicated back through the funnel. And there's lots of examples of how these are changing. And this is where technology can actually also help leapfrog some steps. I mean, a lot of the successful disruptive businesses that we're seeing are taking parts of this customer journey, of the customer experience, and saying, well, why do we need to do this step? We can take them directly from here to here. Accelerating that, giving them new pathways to find out information or news about your brand. And there's not just one of these, right? I think the other thing to understand is that you're going to have different customers, different personas that you'll define. And each of them may have a different journey. I mean, just to give this a real example of this, and this kind of goes back to the introduction you mentioned around, how do you bring customers along that maybe aren't all the way to, I know my mom's not on Snapchat, but she's still buying groceries. How am I going to make sure I reach her while I'm also reaching the next generation of customers? And grocery is one of those businesses where you really are reaching a broad audience, right? Everybody's shopping in some way, shape, or form to feed themselves. So you're going to have different customer journeys. You're going to have different personas. But as an example, within grocery, for all this conversation about print, the decline of print, right? Well, the reality is if you talk to customers and ask them, how do you typically learn information from grocery stores about this weekly specials, for example? We did a survey. We found that 72% of customers looking for weekly specials still turn to the Sunday Circular, still turn to the newspaper, right? That's a reality that you need to make sure you understand from a business perspective, while you still need to get excited about what's next and what are all these other new ways I'm going to reach customers. So, I might have one journey which shows that the discovery phase is really going to be, through print for some of my audience. But then there's others who only want to communicate with me digitally. Maybe they want to see my weekly email. Maybe they want to be able to go to my website and find news and information on the website. So it's really important. This is really where that piece comes together of understanding your customer journey, understanding how they want to interact with your brand, giving them new tools so that you're growing as print is coming down, that if you've got other digital capabilities that are growing, that's important. But it's not one of those things where you can just flip the switch, right? I can certainly talk to you about businesses that have tried to say, okay, we're all about digital transformation, right? This was our old business. This is going to be our new business. One day we're going to flip that giant lever and we're going to be a digital business. Well, if you were around before, if your business has been around for several decades, you've got to think about the transition. You've got to think about how you're going to get from A to B in a way that's going to be challenging customers to think about new ways to interact with the brand, but not, disrupt in terms of just losing that customer base. You still want to make sure you keep people as you're bringing them into this new fold. So really, that's a critical piece where collaboration also happens. I mean, I would say early days at P&G, I certainly learned the importance of collaboration and strong multifunctional teams working together to solve business problems. You do that every day here at Yale. That will be the reality no matter where you are. But I would tell you that this is certainly changing in terms of who you're interacting with. I spent a lot more time with technologists than I ever did early in my career at P&G. And that collaboration early and often with with the folks within your technology group, if you're a marketer, is really important because they may be able to think about some things that you didn't even know were available to you. So if you think about tools that could help improve the customer experience or maybe change the journey a little bit, they need to be a partner to that process. So what is the promise? What's the digital imperative? Like, why, do we have to do this really, or can we just keep doing what well, you don't really have much choice. I mean, if you're a marketer, you're certainly seeing the change happening, but you're also excited about the possibilities. I mean, there are tools available to us now, data that is available to us now that we did not have, that is just incredible in terms of the opportunities that it creates. A lot of words up here, but again, so many different ways to think about that customer journey, from really understanding customer insights, their behaviors, not just stated, but derived. What are they really doing? Personalizing interactions, automating interactions, testing and learning throughout a process, connecting devices, being able to get one view of a customer as they kind of go through that journey and say, okay, well, this person that visited my website is the same person who opened this email, who's the same person who just posted that customer service comment in social media. So how do we navigate the multiple channels? How do we manage our loyalty data and be smarter about loyalty? Content, and that's a beast that you've constantly got to feed. I mean, how do you keep the content cycle going so that you stay relevant, that customers have new things to hear from you and want to engage with your brand? So all of these really kind of unfold in terms of the possibilities for marketers that really even weren't there a few years ago. And then there's some new and emerging things that I've got on here that I'm frankly learning about myself. I mean, blockchain, I don't know, who's heard of blockchain? right? So, technology underlying Bitcoin, but some new applications to marketing that are emerging that are very interesting. How it can actually impact loyalty programs, for example. It has the potential to really dramatically change how we think about loyalty and how we track transactions. AI, artificial intelligence, huge opportunity within marketing, and a lot of machine learning-based programs that are now influencing how we interact with customers and really are behind the scenes as a lot of these technologies reach our customers. So huge and incredible amount of change, but a lot of opportunity within that. So what does all that really mean? Well, as I think about how I would often talk about it at Stew Leonard's, we've got to stop as marketers trying to sell filet mignon to vegetarians, right? This drove me crazy. We did this, this is a challenge in any business, right? Not just in grocery, but how do you, if you have all these tools available to you, I think customers now more than ever also expect that you're going to get to know them, that you're going to understand them. And again, think about any business that you've been working on, any category you've been working in. If you've told me that you are a vegetarian and I keep trying to sell you meat, eventually you're going to say, what? That's enough. This person doesn't understand who I am. They don't understand what I'm really looking for. And that expectation is increasing with customers, right? So if you have all this information and you're not using it, you really can actually miss some opportunities, but also start to annoy your customers. So that's the Burning Platform. How do we make sure we are leveraging this great information, these great resources that we have to help grow a business? That leads to another key component of the journey, which is content. Right? So you've gotten their attention. What are you actually going to talk to them about? How are you going to portray your brand and bring to life the equities that you're trying to develop within your communication? I would say I really learned about the power of content in my time at Subway restaurants. We worked on some really incredible and great brand integrations opportunities that went way beyond traditional product placement to really delivering strategic messages in places that were current and relevant to customers. And my boss and mentor at Subway, Tony Pace, who was the global CMO at the time when I was there, he would often use the word current. We're really trying to be current. And what that means is, it's about relevance. It's about really understanding beyond, your world of your business and what you're trying to do. What are customers thinking about? What matters to them? What's going on in their lives? What's going on in the world? That context can be much broader and should be much broader than just your business. Just to give you an example, so from a Subway perspective, we were trying to do a lot to communicate, Subway as a way to fuel healthy and active lifestyles. Right? So we were placing ourselves in places where that was what the conversation was about. And it was integrated in a way where you couldn't DVR it out of the program. It was integrated. I don't know if anybody ever saw, for example, some of our Biggest Loser integrations that we did. Just how do you become part of the show was kind of the idea. Well, that's same for whether it's television or other mediums. How do you become part of that native content and really put your brand in places that is going to deliver a strategic message about who you are and what you're trying to be. That all said, I also don't want to overthink this. I mean, upper right-hand corner, you see Stew Leonard there, who's a current CEO of Stew Leonard's. One of the best posts we ever did in my time at Stew Leonard's was Powerball. The lottery was up to some huge jackpot. Everybody was going insane about it. It was the conversation that was happening around water coolers. He did a simple post where he bought a couple tickets and told people he was going to share the winnings if he won with the customers and asked them what they would do with the money. We got more engagement on that post than any other one we had done. And the interesting thing is it grew our fan base, it engaged customers socially, and you could say, well, yeah, that was just a short-term thing, a gimmick that might create a pop, but then you lose all those people. We didn't. They actually stayed engaged in the conversation. So we got their attention, and we had an opportunity to talk to them about other things. So content is critical, but it has to be current. It has to be relevant. It has to be really tied to what customers are thinking about in a broader context of society and their lives. Another way to think about this too is, if you think about media and traditional media planning and buying, you would often think about this idea of how do I be more always on, top of mind with customers, right? So we look at our media calendars at Subway and be thinking about, okay, how many weeks of the year do I have covered? What are the different elements of the media mix that I'm going to employ at different parts of the year to help support the business? That's important, but always on kind of implies this notion of talking at consumers. And I think we all realize that now more than ever, it's a two-way conversation. It's an engagement with customers. It's about being in the conversation and not just talking at people. It's about talking with people. So, how do you be always on? Well, it goes back to currency, it goes back to content I was just talking about, but what you're really striving to do is to be in those conversations that are happening around the water cooler, that are in part of people's daily lives. Hey, did you see that show last night? Hey, do you remember when this happened? Oh yeah, did you see that? You want to be in that conversation, right? So that's a really critical insight as you think about how we engage with customers, and especially in social media, and how people want to interact. It's a conversation. You need to be authentic. But you also, if they say something, they expect to hear a response, and it should be a response that reflects their needs and wants. And the other piece of this too is we have these amazing tools now for amplifying word of mouth. I mean, if you think about fundamental to a lot of businesses, it's just those conversations that you have. You had a great experience with a brand, you communicate that to a friend, you communicate that to a family member. You guys can all think of those examples of maybe you had a conversation recently about, oh, I had a terrible experience here, or, oh, hey, just got this thing and I love it. Well, those conversations are a marketer's dream. Those are really critical to business growth. It translates into reviews and ratings and other platforms that people are talking about your brand. Done right, though, it has an incredible opportunity to really foster positive word of mouth. So being in that conversation in a positive way, having people talk about your brand is really what you're striving for here. Another principle I would share that has served me well over the years is this idea of strategic certainty and tactical flexibility. So what does that mean? Again, now more than ever, with all the distractions that are happening within the marketplace and all the changes that are happening, it's important that you kind of have your North Star. Seems simple, but it's important. Strategic certainty is a sense of where you're going, how you get there, as the sands shift, as new technologies become available to you, as your customer tastes change, as new and emerging areas of your business grow. You need to be adaptable, you need to be nimble. Which is hard for a big company sometimes. You hear a lot about big corporations that are trying to become more nimble, operate in ways that are much more entrepreneurial. And if you think about some of those businesses that are really disrupting industries, they have that advantage. And a lot of the big companies that are kind of the ones with these big infrastructures and are really challenged to think about how can I evolve my organization to think like that and to be like that and to have that same flexibility and be nimble. I think Subway, we did, this was as big as we were at the time. I think this is one thing that our leadership did a good job with, which was really just trying to make sure we were a big company, but still operated in a very entrepreneurial way. And I think that comes with a franchise business. That's part of it too. You have basically a whole army of entrepreneurs out there who have started these small businesses, who are also great incubators for ideas. So we would constantly be looking to our franchisees to see what are they trying, what's working, what's not. And you might find a little pocket of something working in one area that you can apply at a larger scale and really help your business. Just to give you an example of this, $5 footlongs, which you talked about, $5 footlongs, which was an incredible success for Subway. I mean, it was really transformational for already a big business. The growth that we had during that period when we launched $5 footlongs was incredible. But I would tell you that wasn't the first thing we did. Where it started was a recognition that value was really important within the category. And that sounds simple, but that we didn't have currently the right value proposition, that we needed to think about how we were going to deliver value to customers in a better way. It was around 2008, which you think about the US market, for example, was kind of really at that cliff where we were going into the Great Recession. So all of a sudden you had customers talk about relevance and currency. We're thinking about value and what that meant and how they were having to reshape their own lives to, losing a job or change in economic circumstance. So we knew value was important. Well, I would tell you there were a couple of examples I could give you along the way before we got to $5 footlongs that were strategically right. We knew we needed to get at value, but were tactical failures. Didn't work. So easy for us to say, oh, well, value obviously isn't important to customers. No. The strategy was right. The tactics were wrong. We found this opportunity with $5 footlongs, which was actually growing some stores in Florida. There were some franchisees that were running this program, and it was doing really well. And part of my role at Subway was kind of like it's almost like being a stock picker a little bit. You kind of had all these people coming to you saying, oh, we're doing this program. It's great. It's the best thing since sliced bread, and you got to do this. So we'd have to sift through all of that and try to really understand, what is something that might be able to be applied that could really help others. $5 footlong is a great example of that. If we hadn't had the strategic certainty to know that value was a place that we wanted to win, we probably might have said, okay, well, that didn't work, let's try something else, and we didn't. We went to other tactics, not other strategies. So really important, especially as things unfold in the technology field. Marketing, just like anything else, needs research and development. I mean, with all of these technologies, with all of the different possibilities, you always have to set aside some portion of your budget for learning, for testing, for experimentation. You think about how it applies in other categories, in pharmaceuticals and other businesses. Marketing should have that same mindset. You have to apply R&D, research and development thinking to marketing. One thing I learned at Stew's, which has another nice, fun twist on R&D, which I think also applies here, is it was affectionately referred to as retrieve and duplicate, was what R&D meant. And if you think about that, there's a lot of businesses out there right now that are transforming industries that, if you look at the model that they've created, could easily be applied to other industries and can be disruptive. Right? So there's a lot of new companies that are emerging right now who are looking at what Airbnb is doing and saying, how do I take what they're doing here, which is awesome, and apply that to a different industry? And you're going to see a lot of success stories coming out of those kind of tangential opportunities, because people see what's underlying the change and think about it in different ways and think about how it can be applied elsewhere. So this notion, I don't mean this in any kind of patent violation sense, but retrieve and duplicate, there's plenty of success stories out there that you can learn a lot from. And especially in technology, there are a lot of people at marketing, within the marketing world, who are trying and experimenting with all these things. I am constantly reading and learning and seeing what others are doing in the space, trying to learn from them what worked and what didn't, so that I can kind of fast track my own experience level and leverage from their successes and failures as well. So remember that you've got to have a strong desire to continue to research and develop within marketing. So let's go back to dining and to grocery for a second. I mean, there's been a ton of disruption within the space, right? So whether it's delivery services, whether it's new kind of companies like Blue Apron or Plated that are offering meal solutions. And this is not even to mention all the changes happening within the existing grocery channels in space. So all of the, all the big brands within grocery. Whole Foods launched the 365 new platform. So everybody's trying to innovate. Everybody's trying to understand how technology applies to their business and how they're going to leverage it. But there's so much activity in this space. Just curious, show of hands, any of you used one of these three services? Just anybody want to give me an example of which one they used and why? Anybody?
I've used both Blue Apron and Uber Eats. I use Uber Eats here at SOM when I'm here for dinner.
Okay.
I typically order from a place downtown. And I still order, even when they jacked up the price on me, they had me. And then Blue Apron I used for a bit. My issue with them is the waste.
Okay.
I get the deliveries, but
Yeah.
the meals.
Yeah. My problem's the other one, which is I've got a family of 5 and never enough food. So it might.
The packaging.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. Well, getting portion sizing right, but you're right. Packaging is an issue too. You are throwing away a lot of packaging when you're. Anybody else? I mean, and what drew you to those experiences? Like, why were you intrigued by trying them?
Uber Eats was convenience. I think I was in San Francisco previously,
Right.
so I actually knew people that worked at Uber Eats. I trusted them.
Okay.
That was just kind of an easy, simple thing to enter New Haven.
Yeah.
Blue Apron, I am trying to eat healthier in school, and it's really hard to go grocery shopping,
Right.
eat well, and I eat pizza all the time.
Yeah.
So it was, it was motivated by trying to eat healthier.
Right. So the things you just mentioned are very much about your customer experience as a customer, right? How do you make it easier for you? How do you make it simpler? How do I do, things like eat healthier when it's difficult at school? Those are the kind of questions that people are asking as marketers as you think about the journey mapping and about how you can change people's customer experience. Some of those options weren't available to you even a few years ago. So, you can see how transformative this can be and why everybody, even the existing grocery stores, are kind of scrambling to catch up. Has anybody used Amazon Fresh? What drove you to try Amazon Fresh?
I got rave reviews from my classmate.
Okay.
And it's.
Was she the one who told you about it? Yeah.
I got rave reviews from my classmate, and then I like that it's just really easy that you can just get the stuff, and then they come and pick the packaging up.
Right. How was your experience?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their fruits and vegetables are amazingly.
Great quality. Great quality, right? So why, Amazon, big business, got a lot of, things that they're working on. Why would they want to get into the grocery business? Why do people think they'd want to get in the grocery business?
Because they're leveraging there's so many consumers that really trust them, and it's so convenient to order on their platform, and you always get it within 2 days if you have Prime. So
Yep.
I think that it's like that convenient partner that you can just go to. I need this thing last minute.
Yeah.
Groceries when we're so busy.
Yep. Any other thoughts on that?
I agree with the customers who are already there, but I also feel that they want to be your everyday store, so they want to be pervasive in your life and
Yes.
get to know everything that you need, and they can actually get data from that as well, and your behaviors and patterns, and when you start to establish relationships with them in that kind of areas, and then those relationships also migrate to others, so in the end you just go to them for everything.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you think about the grocery industry, first of all, it's big, right? There's a lot of money there. It's over a $700 billion industry in the US alone annually. So there's a lot of money within the grocery business. But exactly that, it's about penetration, right? It's about frequency. Very attractive to a brand like Amazon, who is trying to be your everyday source for lots of other products as well. So they're thinking, if I can get in your household and become a regular part of your behavior, you're going to order groceries with me, and why wouldn't you add on a couch, right? So really think about, how do I become, really a part of their day-to-day experience, and how can I leverage a category of grocery to help me with other goals that I have as a business? So just think about how much that is disrupting an industry like groceries, right? You think about the grocery store down the street and how everybody is going to react and catch up and say, okay, I know I'm getting some trickle of lost business to brands like Amazon. How am I going to make up for that? What am I going to do? And that's why you see, delivery options. I know Whole Foods has had an ongoing partnership with Instacart, which also has click and pick up type solutions. We launched a click and pick up service for our wine stores at Stew Leonard's while I was there, which is already off to a good start. So everybody's scrambling to figure out, okay, what do I learn here? What are the applications to this that are going to apply to my business, and what do I need to do to transform? But each one of these three examples, I think, are really looking at that customer experience and challenging what's been typical of that experience and what that map might have looked like within grocery a few years ago, and saying, how can I change that, and how can I apply technology to make that even better? So, as you think about improving customer experience, it's simple questions, right? How do I make it easier? How do I make it faster? How do I make it cheaper? How do I make it more personal? Somebody looking to eat healthier. How do I make it better? And simple questions, but really a lot of power and transformation within those questions as people think about existing industry, what they're doing today, and how can I leverage technology to really help turn that on its head and change that. So that's really where, as you think about it from a marketer's perspective, where I get excited is thinking about how can I take technology to answer some of these simple questions and really help change businesses and ultimately grow them, build them. This is interesting quote I heard from, or something I saw in Gartner, but by 2017, the CMO will spend more on IT than the CIO. I did not think I was going to be a technologist when I came to business school, okay? And this really just underscores the notion of how much technology is becoming a part of a strategic marketing career. Because you have to be able to understand how you can leverage the power of these technologies. It doesn't mean you're going to build the system and connect the cords and all those kinds of things, but it does mean you have to strategically understand how they can be of value to you, how your customer perceives them, how your customer's needs are changing based on them, and how you can leverage them for your business to do that. So I just thought that was a really telling quote, and I would tell you from my own experience and just looking at my budgets, I see this happening. I mean, this is reality. There's a lot of money being spent in marketing right now as part of this disruption. So as you would imagine, with all that spending comes this huge explosion of marketing technologies. I don't know if you guys have seen this chart before, but there's just so many new technologies that are emerging within the marketing space. Lots of acronyms as well. There's been an explosion in new acronyms that I've had to learn. But it's really incredible, all of these possibilities that are now available. But it's easy to get lost. I mean, this is overwhelming. How can anybody be expected to know what all these different companies are up to, and which one's better than the other, and which one should I go with? I mean, it can drive you nuts. And I would tell you, from a marketing perspective, just like any time that there's been a proliferation within a category of some new capability or lots of options, what happens? Aggregation, right? You have some players come into the mix who can start to sift through that for you, help pull some of those pieces together, help you understand, if there's 10 in there, who are the top players. you really need to look to what are those sources to help you understand the technical universe, but then find a way to apply that to your business that makes sense. So that's really the key challenge as you think about this explosion in marketing technologies. One solution, this isn't the only answer, but you also see the emergence of these marketing hubs. Has anyone heard about marketing automation platforms? So there's a number of big players out there. Adobe's got a suite for this. I was using Oracle. We're implementing Oracle at Stew Leonard's. But what these are they're really platforms that will integrate a number of those different technologies. So they help you on a number of different platforms, from managing your audience, understanding your audience, your target, helping with workflow and collaboration, helping with kind of intelligent orchestration of your activities. So this week I've got a campaign running. I'm going to send these emails. I'm going to put these posts out in social media. I'm going to have this print campaign going out. I'm going to do this so all of these different pieces and how you kind of pull the pieces of the puzzle together. There's also great research opportunities to test and learn as you go, and real-time optimization as well. So the wonderful thing about these technologies is it's not like old world where you'd put out, for example, a research study with 10 concepts, and you'd wait to see in a few weeks whether any of those concepts were resonating with customers or not. You can actually use your digital media today to get answers to those questions. You can use testing in a very kind of tight forum to understand interaction with your brand. So let's say, for example, I create 4 different versions of a digital media communication, then push out some digital advertising display or on your mobile phone. I can very quickly see which of those 4 ads is getting the most response, the most engagement. I'm, in essence, doing concept testing through my media platforms. So you really need help kind of in real time optimizing some of that. And the final piece is measurement. I mean, the wonderful thing about technology is you can actually probably more closely measure a lot of these things than you might have been able to with even some of the older communication elements. So thank goodness for the marketing hub. I know it's been helpful for me as I've tried to navigate this explosion of technologies, but they're also out there acquiring companies and sifting through this and thinking about how do I ultimately get to kind of the holy grail for a marketer, which is that one view of the customer. So how can I understand and track all of those different interactions, touch points you've had with my brand, so that I know that you're the same person over here that also came and visited us over here, right? This is an example from Oracle. They all have similar platforms, but this is one I was working with. But if you think about your customer and that customer journey, that map, right? Think about the process they might go through. Maybe they first start by visiting your website. They just heard about your brand, want to check you out, want to learn a little bit more about who you are, what you're about, what you're up to. They might start off as a web visit. Maybe they then, if you have a physical location, might go visit a store, or might want to dig a little deeper and go read some reviews about others who have had experiences with your brand. They're going to all these various touch points, but how do I as a marketer know that that's the same person so that I can kind of understand their journey, be able to track that, and hopefully be able to communicate them in a way that's going to really support my process and what I'm trying to do in selling product or in selling my brand through that discussion. So that's really where the power comes in. But again, it's also been one of the biggest challenges for marketers. How do you connect the dots? How do you really make sure that that this person who made the call to the customer service is the same person that went over here and opened that email? And that's really what we're trying to get to with some of these engagements across kind of this integration across the various platforms. I thought this was a really telling quote to come back to, and certainly if you think about Apple's success, I think this certainly resonates with a lot of folks. But you really kind of goes back to where I started with the fundamentals. You really have to make sure you're focused on the customer journey, the experience, and then say, how can technology help me? Not the other way around. I think there's far too many people, and certainly I see this within the marketing space, that get excited about what they're reading about in Adweek or the next thing that's coming. And yeah, you need to be aware of those things. Yeah, you should ask a question like, can this be applied to my business? Can this help me? But it's not about technology for technology's sake, right? You can probably all think of an example where maybe you had an experience with a brand where they went and did something, you're like, oh, that doesn't really help me. I don't know why they would go do all that with technology. It's not really adding to my experience. So fundamentally, it's about customers and making sure you understand them first and then figure out how technology can support that. Now, with any opportunity also comes challenges. I mean, I would also tell you within the digital space, all of those new marketing technologies, all of the possibilities with digital media and how you can reach customers, it's definitely a buyer beware kind of atmosphere. I heard a great quote from someone, was talking about the opportunity with digital and was talking about the fact that where there's mystery, there's margin, right? There's the opportunity. There's a lot of money to be made in the digital space. And there are a lot of great, credible brands that are moving in that space, new technologies that are wonderful technologies that are emerging within the space. But again, you as a buyer of that really need to be vigilant. You need to make sure you verify. You need to make sure you understand. You need to make sure you manage actively your investment in digital so that you're really getting the most from the resources that you're applying there. I mean, this stat is I think certainly shaken a lot within the market, a lot of folks within the marketing world, but over $8.2 billion in digital ad fraud. Now, that's, if you're not familiar with that, it's basically non-human traffic or bots out there that are in essence showing up as impressions that brands are paying for. Well, I don't want to pay for that. I want to pay for impressions with real people who are actively engaged and interested in my brand. That's what I should be paying for. And there's a lot of tension on this. This isn't just happening. Certainly a lot of conversation within the industry about this. Even beyond just that digital media piece, did anybody see the news even this week about YouTube? You guys, what was going on with YouTube? Who saw that?
Is it with the hate ads, the hate speech and the ads?
Yeah. So there's been a number of brands that in a very high-profile way have kind of come forward and said they're going to pull their spending on the YouTube or on some of the Google's platforms in the short term until they figure this piece puzzle out. But as a brand marketer, you want to make sure you know where your ads are going to be placed and what's going to be associated with those ads. And I talked before about content and about branded integration and about strategic messages. If your ad trying to sell happy shampoo is here, and right next to it is a hate group or is some other message or something that you would say is not shouldn't be associated with your brand, that's a problem. That's a problem. And while we get assurances as marketers from media companies that say, don't worry, we're going to put you in good positions, you're only going to be next to the right kind of content, it's very hard for them to police. It's very hard for them to control. And there have been many high-profile examples of where those promises were made, but then someone actually would find an example of, whoa, what's my brand doing there? So these are the kind of things when I say buyer beware, incredible opportunity, but you have to be vigilant. You really have to look and see and make sure you verify that your investment is well spent. Like anything, this also needs to come back to leadership. So how can you, within this room, as you go back to organizations and think about your role within marketing, strategy, technology, what is the role of the marketer within all this? Well, I think now more than ever, you often talk about marketing as a kind of combination of art and science. That's still very much true. But I think now more than ever, we're also being asked to play the conductor, right? We're really being looked to help navigate in a multifunctional way some of these new and emerging technologies. I mean, honestly, often CEOs are turning to marketing people to ask questions about technology and applications of strategy and technology to their business as much as they might be talking to their chief technology officer. So a real opportunity to embrace that and be an orchestrator of strategy and of change within companies. You also have to be a champion for this. These are new tools. These are new things. It's hard to convince your CFO that you're going to go spend money on these new platforms. Well, great. Like anything else, I'm going to ask you what's the guaranteed ROI you're going to commit. I don't know. I mean, I can certainly give you a sense of here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's what I think it can do for our business. But you have to be able to show that value and close that loop and really understand the investment that you're making. I learned early on, and I believe this, to my core as a marketer, that marketing is an investment, not an expense, right? You have to have that mindset that marketing is investment in a business. It's not another expense item that can be cut, and when budgets are tight, let's cut marketing. If you do it right, and if you really create kind of the climate where they do turn to marketing as a source for growth, as a source for building revenue, for growing sales. That's the challenge, but that's also the opportunity, and that's why you have to be a champion behind this change, especially for industries that are being disrupted. I mean, you could continue to just kind of watch things trickle down, but you can also be the active partner who is shouting from the rooftops, we've got to move over here, we've got to change direction, and that's really critical. It was true, in the businesses I've worked on, and I would tell you, whatever you're doing here or after SOM, I would think about that and think about what role can you play to help shape the future of an organization, because it really is important for us to ask the tough questions and to, again, not just apply technology because it's there, but really understand customers and be that voice of the customer throughout that process. So I know you're normally supposed to have within a presentation no more than 3 to 5 things. I'm sure you learned that in one of your classes. Yeah, I've got more than 3 to 5 things. Like we have 8 on here. But just to kind of summarize some of what I've talked about, because I think they are all kind of important pieces to this puzzle. Fundamentals matter. I think if you haven't forgotten, if you remember nothing else from this presentation, remember as we're going off to explore these new technologies, make sure you have a clear sense of strategy and of customer thinking, because they will serve you well throughout your career no matter what you're doing. You've got to dig deeper and really understand customer journeys and how technology is transforming their experiences and their expectations. It really has changed, and the tools that customers have available to them to interact, to use, for example, social media as a customer service platform. I mean, that wasn't there years ago. So really understand how they want to interact with your brand. Collaborate not just with your other typical folks within this room, multifunctional partners within finance or supply chain or other areas, but technology really needs to be at the table earlier, because again, they may be a great source for some ideas you might not have thought about that can really help shape that customer experience. Strategic certainty, tactical flexibility. Again, having that North Star says you know where you're headed, even as you're experimenting and trying new things. Being always in, testing and learning, measurement, and championing the change. So, hopefully this was at least at 30,000 foot helpful in terms of understanding some of the nuggets of wisdom I've learned from a career in marketing. But I would tell you the things that maybe I thought weren't as relevant to my experiences today, I would tell you are almost in some ways now more relevant than ever. And that it really is a combination of a number of different pieces of a puzzle. So, if you are interested, I asked the question at the beginning about marketing and strategy and technology. If you are interested in any one of those 3, I would tell you you need to be all 3, or at least need to have some comfort level navigating within any of those spaces, because they are there whether you are seeking them out or not. As I said, when I started my career, I was about marketing, I was about strategy, but technology has grown to become a very big part of what I do and have to think about on a daily basis. And it makes me a better marketer. It makes me better able to understand how customers' needs are changing and what I can do to support that. So those are my thoughts. Happy to answer whatever questions you may have or talk a little bit more deeply on any one of those subjects. But hopefully that was helpful perspective, and I'll be around for a few minutes, so happy to answer any questions I can. Thanks very much. Anybody have any thoughts, questions?
Just a quick reminder to please use the microphones in front of you for questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really informative and helpful. My question has to do with, all this technology is bringing in all this data, all these insights you were talking about, but then your most successful post was this kind of authentic, spontaneous post of the CEO. And I come from companies that did a lot of that grassroots kind of stuff. And I'm just wondering how you at these bigger companies are balancing taking these insights, creating these campaigns versus the authenticity, and how do you balance those?
Well, the authenticity should always be there. I mean, you should really understand your brand voice for any of these digital communications and make sure that anything you're doing is on message and in your voice. But I would say, what I didn't say that's behind that is any stream of content has a couple different sources that's populating that content. So if you were working on developing a content strategy for a brand, what you would typically find is that you'll have some planned content, things that are kind of central and strategic to your brand that you're developing over here and you have a timeline for, and kind of know your calendar for when you're going to communicate these different elements. But you're also going to have some spontaneous content, which is a little bit more as things happen and unfold. What are some things that I maybe want to jump on that are relevant conversations with customers? And it's those two things coming together. So I don't want to tell you that the data doesn't matter, because it absolutely does. I mean, there's things that you're going to learn from that deep analysis, data analytics, behavioral science that really helps you understand your customer, which is going to feed into your content strategy. But it's also saying, don't forget the art part to this too, which is at times just being relevant. And if the world is talking about March Madness, how are you in the conversation? And that's not something that maybe you might have planned for at the same level, because you don't know who's going to win the game this week. So there's always going to be a combination of planned and unplanned activity in your content stream, and both are important. Both are good. Good question. Anybody else?
I was just wondering, we talked about all this disruption in marketing and in the role of the CMO. Like, how do you keep up to date with the new trends, and like, how do you educate yourself with all these like changes?
Sure. First of all, I do a lot of reading. I mean, I'm on a number of email chains, and I've got a number of different sources that I like to go to, and I just kind of get the daily news and kind of see what's going on. And it's evolving that fast. I mean, honestly, you miss a week, and you might not, you might be a step behind. Find a good partner. I would say, as a marketer, I've always also tried to seek out agencies that can be effective partners and soundboards and put a little method to my madness at times in terms of a double check to say, okay, here's where I think I need to go and what I want to do. Does that make sense? Make this better, challenge this, kick it around with me. So I think having the right agency partners is really critical. But also don't forget yourself and your own experiences or family members or friends' experiences as customers. Those can be important too. I started my career in hair color and hair care. Okay, so obviously I wasn't a customer. I wasn't like their biggest customer. But that taught me early on the power of data, right? So I didn't have to be a consumer. I could learn from the information that I had around me about who my customers were. That said, if you are a customer and you are experiencing those brands in a database, you know why you're doing them. I mean, you were talking before about your experiences with Blue Apron or Uber Eats. You can kind of articulate, what was it about that interaction that I liked. So I think both of those pieces are important. Just just remember that you too are a consumer, and that's another important source for kind of understanding what's coming and what's next. Other questions?
You mentioned a lot about the technology, how technology is going to change the way marketers doing marketing. So can you give us a specific example that how you or your team leverage new marketing technology to change your marketing approach or the result?
Sure. Well, let me go back to the example I was talking about one view of the customer, right? So before, if I was trying to orchestrate a marketing campaign and I had in that campaign different elements of the media mix, let's say I was going to run some television, I was going to run some radio advertising, I was going to run some email, I was going to do some social posts, I would have teams working on those things, and they kind of each be in their function, part of an organized campaign, but executing those different elements. As an example of how technology can now be applied to that, I can actually automate some of that activity. Right? I can actually plan out campaigns and have it set up so that it's more always on and engaged. So let me give you an example. Think about loyalty programs or CRM, right? ECRM. You have new members constantly coming into your loyalty program, or you may have best customers in that loyalty program that are achieving certain milestones, right? Let's say I want to set a program or a campaign that says, once this person reaches this threshold, I want to send them this communication, right? Well, now I have tools to automate that and to automate that across multiple platforms so that I don't have, as a marketer, have to think about, okay, let me go, this month I've got to make sure I reach out to all my best customers. That is always on for me now. That is automated. That is happening every day, whether I'm there or not. If somebody signs up, there's a journey that they're going to follow along in terms of I send them an email 2 days after their sign up. I'm going to a week later, send them this thank you. 3 weeks later, I'm going to ask them how their experience. So you can think about building these journeys, and that orchestration, that kind of automation piece is, I think, a great application of technology for marketers. The other piece is really just being able to sift through the data. I mean, we talk about big data. It really is that big, and one of the challenges is, for all of this information that's available to you, how do you really know what's important? How do you sift through that? How do you really identify patterns that are meaningful to your business? I think that's another application of technology to marketing that is very real, because just trying to sift through a mountain of CRM data, it doesn't work that way. You really have to apply some intelligence around that to be able to know how you can actually leverage that information.